The night air in Copper Hollow was thick with dust and tension. The sun had barely sunk behind the jagged hills, painting the sky a deep red, when Clara May lit the last of the lamps in the Silver Star Saloon. The light flickered over rows of empty glasses and worn-out tables, signs of a long week and a hard life. Outside, the wind whistled like a ghost through the shuttered windows, carrying with it the faint echo of hooves far off on the trail. Clara paused, her rag still in hand. It wasn't payday nor festival night. No one rode that fast into town after dark unless they had a reason, and none of those reasons were good. The piano player stopped mid-note. The card players folded their hands. A hush fell across the room just as the saloon doors creaked open, letting in a cold gust and 12 shadowed figures. They walked in 2 by 2, tall, dust-covered, and silent. The Black Ridge Gang. Everyone in Copper Hollow knew the name. Parents used it to frighten children into obedience. Men who had seen them before rarely lived long enough to talk about it. The patrons scattered like leaves. Chairs scraped. Boots thudded toward the back door. Even the bartender slipped into the storeroom, muttering prayers under his breath. But Clara stayed. She stood behind the bar, heart pounding beneath her corset, eyes fixed on the tallest of the 12. His hat was pulled low, his coat torn at the shoulder, a revolver gleaming at his side. The others waited for his lead, their presence filling the room with a quiet, electric menace. He took off his hat, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds. Steady, unreadable. "Whiskey," he said, voice low and gravel-edged. Clara swallowed. "For all 12? A ghost of a smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. "For all 12. Her hands trembled only slightly as she poured. One by one, the men took their drinks, clinking glasses like soldiers before a final battle. She watched them, how they moved with strange discipline, how they said little, how they obeyed their leader without question. These weren't drunken cowhands spoiling for trouble. They were men used to killing and to silence. When she set the last glass down, one of them, a scarred man with a snake tattoo on his neck, leaned in close. "You got guts, sweetheart. Most folk would have run." Before Clara could respond, the leader turned his head sharply. "That's enough, Vince." His tone carried no anger, just authority, the kind that comes from years of command. Vince backed off instantly. Clara blinked, surprised. For a gang of murderers, they showed her more respect than many lawmen ever had. The leader nodded toward her. "You serve straight. You keep quiet. We'll cause you no harm." She studied him, noticing the faint limp in his step, the weariness behind his sharp gaze. Something about him didn't fit the stories, the tales of brutality, of towns burned and sheriffs buried. This man looked tired, not cruel. Outside, the wind picked up again. The piano player, sensing the danger, slipped away, leaving only the soft crackle of the lamps. Clara poured herself a glass to steady her nerves. "What should I call you?" she asked softly. He met her eyes. "Jace," he said. "Jace Redden." The name hit her like a bullet. Jace Redden, the man with a bounty higher than most towns' yearly income. And yet, as she looked at him, she didn't see a monster. She saw something else, something she couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way his eyes softened when they met hers, or the way his hand lingered protectively near his men rather than his gun. Either way, Clara May knew one thing for certain. The moment Jace Redden walked into her saloon, her life would never be the same again. The night deepened outside the Silver Star Saloon. The lamps flickered low, throwing long shadows across the wooden floor. Smoke curled lazily above the bar, and the smell of whiskey and gunpowder mixed in the air. Clara May tried to focus on wiping glasses, but her hands shook with every movement. 12 outlaws sat scattered across her saloon, men who could kill without blinking. Yet somehow, the silence between them felt heavier than any threat. At the center table sat Jace Redden, his hat tipped back just enough to reveal his face under the golden lamplight. He didn't look like the monster the wanted posters made him out to be. There was a sharpness to him, yes, a kind of hardened edge that comes from years of running and fighting. But beneath it, there was something steadier, purpose, control. Clara couldn't make sense of it. Men like Jace weren't supposed to have rules. Yet every movement, every glance, spoke of a man who lived by some quiet, unspoken code. One of his men, a burly redhead named Cutter, slammed his empty glass down and barked, "Another round, sweetheart!" Clara hesitated. Cutter grinned wide, flashing yellowed teeth. You deaf or just stupid? Before she could answer, Jace's voice cut through the room like a blade. You talk to her like that again, you'll drink from a broken bottle. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The air froze. Cutter's grin vanished. Every man in the room knew what would happen if they tested him. Cutter muttered an apology, and Clara, stunned, poured his refill in silence. Her heart still pounded as she looked back at Jace. He hadn't moved. He just stared into his glass, his eyes distant, as though the whiskey held ghosts only he could see. Why'd you stop him? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up slowly. Because manners cost nothing, he said simply. Clara blinked. Outlaws didn't talk like that. You surprise me, Mr. Redden. He gave a faint smirk. That so? I thought men with prices on their heads were too busy running to care about right and wrong. His smirk faded. You think the law knows right from wrong, Miss May? She opened her mouth to answer, but stopped. In Copper Hollow, law and justice weren't the same thing. The sheriff took bribes. The wealthy ran the land. Honest folk like her were left scraping by. Jace watched her wrestle with her thoughts, then said quietly, Don't judge a man by the paper with his name on it. Some of us got hunted not because we did wrong, but because we didn't bow. The words struck something deep in her. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, the door creaked open again. A shadow lingered outside, a deputy watching. Jace's hand drifted toward his revolver, but he didn't draw. Instead, he motioned to one of his men, who calmly shut the doors and dropped the latch. Clara swallowed hard. You expecting trouble? He nodded once. Always. Then his voice softened. Don't be afraid, Clara. We're not here to hurt anyone. Just waiting on a man who owes us blood and gold. That name, blood, hung heavy between them. Clara's stomach twisted. Whoever that man was, he was about to bring more death into her saloon. But Jace's tone wasn't angry. It was weary. There was something about the way he said it. Like vengeance was a burden he'd been carrying too long. As the night stretched on, Clara noticed something else. Though the gang laughed and drank, not one of them crossed Jace's word. They followed his rules, kept their guns holstered, and respected her space. It was the strangest kind of peace, a storm trapped in a bottle. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Clara poured another drink for Jace, her eyes catching his for just a moment too long. She should have feared him. But instead, she felt the first flicker of curiosity, and something she couldn't quite name yet, something dangerous. And as lightning flashed beyond the windows of Copper Hollow, Clara May knew this night was far from over. The clock above the bar ticked past midnight, each soft click echoing louder than gunfire in Clara May's chest. The Silver Star Saloon had never seen a night like this. 12 wanted men drinking quietly, their leader seated in the corner with eyes that missed nothing. Outside, the wind moaned through the shutters and faint voices carried through the darkness. The sheriff's men were gathering, their boots crunching in the dirt. Clara could sense it, the tension rising like heat before a storm. Jace Redden noticed it too. He didn't look up when he said, They're out there, aren't they? Clara froze, her hand tightening on the whiskey bottle. You've got lawmen watching the saloon. Sheriff's been itching for a fight ever since word spread you were headed this way. Jace leaned back, a half-smile tugging at his mouth. Sheriff ought to be careful what he wishes for. Then his tone softened. We don't want blood tonight, Clara. Not unless it comes to us first. He gestured for her to sit. Against her better judgment, she did. The chair creaked between them as he reached into his coat and laid a gold coin on the table. Bright, heavy, and clean. That's for your trouble, he said. And for your silence till dawn. Clara stared at the coin. You think I'd sell my peace that cheap? Jace met her gaze. You think I'm buying peace? The way he said it made her heart falter. He wasn't threatening her, he was warning her. Whatever this night held, she was already tangled in it. She hesitated. Who are you waiting for? Jace's jaw tightened. The other men fell quiet. For a moment, only the wind answered. Then he spoke low and controlled. A man who betrayed us. Stole from my crew. Sold our names to the law for a pardon that won't save him. Clara felt a chill crawl up her spine. What's his name? Jace's eyes lifted to hers, gray as storm clouds. Evan Tate. The world seemed to tilt. She felt the blood drain from her face, her throat tightening until she could barely breathe. Evan Tate, the man who once promised her everything. The one who left her with nothing but a broken heart and unpaid debts. You're lying. Jace's expression didn't change. You know him? Clara's lips trembled. I knew him. Before he turned outlaw. Before he ran. Jace studied her, realization dawning. So he left you behind too. The words hit harder than any bullet. Clara rose from her chair, gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. If he's coming here, you'll bring death to this town. You'll bring it to me. Jace's voice softened, but his resolve didn't waver. Death follows men like Tate. Not because of who we are, but because of what he made us. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I'm giving you a choice, Clara. Take the gold, walk away, and this night won't touch you. Or stay, and see what truth looks like when the lies burn off. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed for her to leave. But something inside her, some stubborn spark of the girl who had once believed in honor, kept her rooted to the floor. You said you don't want blood, she whispered. Then promise me this won't be murder. Jace's gaze didn't waver. I don't kill for pleasure, but I won't hesitate to end a man who's already killed me once. His meaning was clear. Whatever Evan Tate had done had destroyed more than just reputations. It had shattered lives. Clara looked down at the gold coin again, gleaming faintly in the lantern light. It was more money than she made in a month. Enough to buy safety. Enough to buy silence. But when she looked back up at Jace Redden, she saw something gold couldn't buy. Truth. She closed her fingers around the coin, then slid it back across the table. Keep your gold, Mr. Redden. I'll stay. For the first time that night. Jace smiled. A real one, small and tired, but real. Then, Miss May, he said, lifting his glass, I reckon the both of us just made a dangerous choice. And somewhere outside, under the cover of darkness, Evan Tate was already riding toward Copper Hollow. The storm broke over Copper Hollow just after midnight. Rain drummed on the saloon roof like the steady beat of a war drum, and thunder rolled across the distant hills. Inside the Silver Star, the lantern light shimmered over half-empty glasses and weary faces. The Black Ridge gang had grown quiet, some asleep at their tables, others sharpening knives or checking ammunition. The air was thick with the smell of tobacco and waiting. Clara May moved through the room, refilling glasses with steady hands, though her pulse raced. Her thoughts wouldn't settle. She kept replaying the name Evan Tate in her mind, the man who had once held her heart, now riding toward her saloon with vengeance and law at his back. Jace Redden sat alone at a corner table, his revolver lying beside his drink, his coat hanging loosely over his shoulders. He was staring at nothing, the kind of silence that belonged to men who had seen too much. Clara hesitated, then walked over and poured him another drink. You should rest, she said quietly. He didn't look up. Rest don't come easy for men like me. Clara slid into the chair across from him before she could change her mind. The rain filled the silence between them. You said you don't kill for pleasure, she said finally. So what is it you live for, Jace Redden? He let out a low breath that sounded like a half laugh. Used to be for land. I had a ranch once, near the foothills of Red Mesa. Cattle, horses, a little house I built myself. My brother helped me run it. His voice grew distant. Then the railroad came through, promised fair payment, then took the land for nothing. My brother stood against them. He didn't survive the meeting. Clara's chest tightened. And the law didn't help? The law signed the papers that stole my land, Jace said bitterly. After that, I stopped believing in badges and judges. I figured if justice was going to happen, I'd have to carve it out myself. He looked at her then, really looked. You ever lose something that way, Clara? Something that should have been yours? She laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. Only everything. When he didn't look away, she continued. My father owned a small freight company. We worked the wagon lines between here and the mining towns. Then Evan Tate came along. Smooth words, promises of partnership. We trusted him. He bled the company dry, left my father bankrupt, and disappeared with what little money we had left. My father died not long after. I ended up here. Jace's jaw tensed. And now he's the man I'm waiting to hang by his own lies. The storm roared louder outside, rattling the shutters. For a long moment they just sat in silence. Two people shaped by betrayal, bound by the same ghost. You could still run, he said softly. Take your chance before the law comes through that door. Clara shook her head. If I ran every time a man brought trouble, I'd still be running. I'm done hiding, Jace. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, admiration, maybe even fear. You've got more grit than half the men I've ridden with. And you've got more conscience than any outlaw I've ever met, she replied. He smiled faintly. Don't go spreading that around. Wouldn't suit my reputation. For a fleeting moment, laughter broke the tension. It sounded strange and new, like a promise the world might not keep. Then, without thinking, Clara reached out and touched his hand. The roughness of his skin met the softness of hers, and the world seemed to pause. The storm outside faded to a hum. In that moment, two broken souls found a kind of peace neither thought possible. But peace was never meant to last in Copper Hollow, because even as Jace's hand lingered in hers, a shadow moved beyond the window, a flicker of lantern light, the glint of rifles in the rain. The Law and Evan Tate had finally arrived. The rain had slowed to a whisper by dawn, leaving the streets of Copper Hollow glistening like wet glass. A gray light crept through the saloon's windows, washing over tired faces and half-drowned lanterns. Inside the Silver Star, Clara May stood at the bar, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee, staring at nothing. Jace Redden had been awake all night, sharpening his knife by the window, his eyes trained on the main road into town. His men stirred restlessly, sensing the change in the air. The waiting was almost over. When the first sound of hoofbeats echoed down the muddy street, everyone froze. 12 pairs of hands drifted toward their holsters. Jace's voice came low and calm. Hold your fire till I say. Clara's heart began to pound. She stepped closer to Jace. It's him, isn't it? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw them, 5 riders cutting through the dawn mist. The man at their head wore a clean gray coat, polished boots, and a smirk that hadn't changed in years. Evan Tate. He looked nothing like the man she'd once loved. His face was sharper now, colder, his smile carved with arrogance instead of charm. Behind him rode bounty hunters, armed and ready, their badges glinting faintly. Jace turned to his men. Positions. The gang moved with quiet precision. 2 near the stairs, 3 behind overturned tables, others crouched by the windows. They were outnumbered, but they'd faced worse odds before. Clara gripped Jace's arm. There's still time to end this without blood. He shook his head, eyes steady. That man already chose blood when he sold us to the law. He doesn't come here for talk. Before Clara could reply, the saloon doors swung open with a sharp creak. The wind blew in, carrying the scent of gun oil and betrayal. Evan Tate stepped inside. Well, he said, his voice smooth as ever. Didn't think I'd find you so easy, Redden. His gaze swept over the room, then landed on Clara. His smirk faltered for just a heartbeat. And you're still here. Clara's throat tightened. Did you think I'd vanish with the first lie you told? Evan's eyes softened. False sympathy, the same kind that once fooled her. I didn't mean to hurt you, Clara. You were just part of a life I couldn't keep. Don't pretend you left for anything noble, she spat. You left for gold. Jace stepped forward, his revolver at his side but not raised. Enough talk, Tate. You've got 2 choices. Leave the gold you stole and ride out of town, or stay and face what you earned. Evan's smirk returned. You think I came here to bargain? I came to collect. You and your boys are worth more dead than alive. That was all it took. The next second shattered like glass. A flash of lightning. A thunderclap. Then gunfire exploded through the saloon. Jace dove sideways, firing twice. 1 bounty hunter went down. Chairs splintered, bottles shattered, and Clara screamed as a bullet tore through a whiskey barrel behind her. The gang fired back from cover, but they were pinned. Jace rolled behind the bar beside Clara, his face streaked with blood from a cut on his temple. Stay down! He barked, reloading. I can help, she shouted over the chaos. You already are. Through the haze of smoke, she saw Evan striding forward, revolver in hand. You should have run, Clara, he called. I'd have spared you. Her fear burned into fury. You spared no one before. Evan aimed at her, but before he could fire, Jace rose, his gun flashing. The shot hit Evan in the shoulder, spinning him back against a table. The saloon fell silent except for the rain seeping through bullet holes in the roof. Jace stood, breathing hard, his gun still smoking. It's over, he said. Evan, clutching his wound, sneered. Not yet. He reached for his fallen weapon, just as Clara stepped out from behind the bar, a small pistol trembling in her hand. Don't, she whispered. Evan looked up, their eyes meeting one last time. For a heartbeat, she saw the boy he once was, the man who promised her the world. Then she pulled the trigger. The echo of that single shot hung in the air long after the smoke cleared, and as Evan Tate fell, the woman he betrayed finally stood free. Gun smoke hung thick in the air like fog after battle. The once lively Silver Star Saloon was a ruin of splintered tables, shattered glass, and bodies lying still on the floorboards. The smell of burnt powder and spilled whiskey mingled in the dawn light, creeping through bullet holes in the walls. Clara May stood frozen, the pistol still warm in her trembling hands. Evan Tate lay sprawled before her, his blood seeping across the floorboards, his eyes wide with the shock of defeat. For a long, terrible moment, the world was silent except for the rain dripping through the roof. Then came a voice, ragged but steady. "Clara, put the gun down. It was Jace Redden." He was leaning against the bar, his hand pressed to his side where crimson darkened his shirt. Her heart lurched. "You're hit." He gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Bullet grazed me. I've had worse." She rushed to him anyway, kneeling beside him. The blood told a different story. It wasn't a graze. The wound was deep, the kind that could steal a man's strength fast. Around them, the surviving gang members gathered their fallen and weapons, the adrenaline fading into grim silence. One of them, Cutter, spat on the floor near Evan's body. "That snake cost us 3 men. Jace's voice was hoarse but firm. "No more killing. We ride out before the law gets here." Cutter looked up. "And you?" Jace met his gaze. "I'll follow later." Cutter hesitated, then nodded. He knew better than to argue. The men began dragging their wounded toward the back, leaving Jace and Clara alone amid the wreckage. Clara tore a strip from her apron and pressed it to his wound. "Hold still." He winced but didn't pull away. "You don't have to do this." "I know," she said, her voice shaking. "But I'm going to." For the first time since she met him, the unflinching outlaw looked uncertain. His breath came shallow, his skin pale beneath the lamplight. "Clara, if the sheriff finds you here, he'll think you helped us." She met his eyes. "Maybe I did." He stared at her a long moment, the rain outside softening to a drizzle. "You shouldn't have to carry my sins." "Then stop pretending they're all yours." Her voice cracked. "You didn't start this fight. He did. You only finished it." A faint smile tugged at his lips. "You talk like a preacher." "I talk like someone who's tired of men dying for other men's lies," she said quietly. He chuckled, but the sound turned into a cough. "You've got fire, Clara May. World needs more of that." She pressed harder on the wound, desperate. "Don't you dare talk like you're saying goodbye." But his eyelids fluttered, exhaustion pulling at him. "If I don't make it—" She cut him off, tears streaking her face. "You will. You hear me? You will." Outside, the faint clang of spurs echoed through the street. The lawmen were coming. Lanterns flickered in the distance. The town was waking to the aftermath of violence it didn't dare understand. Clara's pulse raced. If they found Jace here, wounded and surrounded by bodies, they'd hang him before noon. She gritted her teeth, grabbed him by the arm, and half dragged, half carried him toward the cellar door behind the bar. "Move," she whispered urgently. He groaned, fighting to stay conscious. "You're risking everything." "Maybe it's time someone did," she said. They stumbled down into the dark cellar just as the saloon doors burst open above. Boots stomped across the floor, voices barked orders. Clara pressed her back against the wall, holding her breath. Through the cracks in the floorboards, she saw the shadows of deputies moving, rifles drawn. One of them muttered, "Looks like the devil himself passed through here." She clutched Jace's hand in the dark. He squeezed weakly in return. Minutes stretched like hours. The lawmen searched, found bodies, cursed, and finally left, dragging Evan Tate's corpse out with them. When their footsteps faded, Clara exhaled the breath she'd been holding. She turned to Jace, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're safe," she whispered. But his eyes were barely open, his voice fading to a whisper. "Safe ain't something I've been in a long time." Then his hand went limp in hers. Clara bit back a sob and pressed her forehead to his chest, listening desperately for the faint beat beneath her ear. It was still there, weak, but there. And as the first light of morning crept through the cracks above, she swore to herself she wouldn't let it fade. Not this man. Not after everything. The first light of morning spilled through the broken windows of the Silver Star Saloon, painting streaks of gold over blood-stained floors. Outside, the town of Copper Hollow was already stirring, lawmen shouting orders, townsfolk whispering about the gunfight that had nearly torn their town apart. Down in the dark cellar, Clara May sat with her back against a whiskey crate, cradling Jace Redden's head in her lap. His breathing was shallow but steady now. She had bound his wound as best she could, though the bandages were soaked through. Above them, boots thudded across the saloon floor as the sheriff's men combed through the wreckage again. Clara's heart raced with every sound. If they found the hidden trapdoor, it would be over. A voice boomed above, rough and familiar. "Ain't no sign of him, Sheriff." "Could be he's already dead." Sheriff Haldoran grunted. "No body, no proof. Spread the word. Redden's wanted, dead or alive. Double the bounty." Clara held her breath until the footsteps faded into the street. Only then did she whisper, "They're gone." Jace stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. "You should have left me," her jaw tightened. "You think I'd let them hang the only man who's ever stood up for me?" He gave a weak chuckle. "You're a fool, Clara May." She brushed the hair from his forehead. "Maybe, but I'm your fool now." For a moment, their eyes met in the half-light. There was a quiet understanding between them, something deeper than words, born from fear, fire, and shared defiance. After hours passed and the streets grew calm again, Clara slipped upstairs. She had to see what remained of her world. The saloon was unrecognizable. Chairs smashed, bottles shattered, the piano splintered to bits. The mirror behind the bar was spiderwebbed with cracks. Her reflection fragmented into a dozen ghostly versions of herself. She gathered what supplies she could: water, whiskey, bread, and a small pouch of coins she'd hidden behind a loose plank. Her trembling hands paused when she saw the wanted poster nailed to the wall. Jace Redden, $1,000 dead or alive. His face, though drawn rough, bore the same haunted eyes she'd just seen in the cellar. When she returned below, Jace was trying to sit up. Pain carved deep lines into his face. "You can't move," she said sharply. "You'll tear the wound open." "I can't stay," he countered. "They'll burn this saloon down looking for me." "You'll hang if they find me here." Clara crossed her arms. "Then we'll go together." He blinked, taken aback. "You don't even know what you're saying." "I'm an outlaw. You got a life here." "Had," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "This place was all I had, and they just took it." "You're all that's left. That makes sense." Silence filled the space between them. Then slowly, Jace nodded. "All right. We move at sundown. North Road, through the canyon. You know how to ride?" She smirked faintly. "I learned quick when my tips weren't enough to buy a wagon ride." By nightfall, they emerged from the saloon's back door like ghosts. Jace leaned heavy against her, his arm around her shoulder. The sky was streaked with dying red light as they made their way to the stable behind the saloon. Clara saddled an old chestnut mare she'd cared for between shifts. "She's slow," she murmured, "but she's quiet." They rode out under the cover of darkness, leaving Copper Hollow behind. The sound of hooves echoed softly through the canyons, the town's lights fading to sparks behind them. For a long time, neither spoke. The desert stretched wide and endless before them, painted silver by the moon. Finally, Jace broke the silence. "You don't have to keep following a man like me, Clara. There's no peace where I'm going." She looked over at him, her voice quiet but steady. "Then I'll bring peace with me." He turned his head toward her, the ghost of a smile crossing his lips. "You got more courage than most men I've known." "And you," she said softly, "got more heart than you admit." The wind carried their words away into the night. Ahead, the open plains waited, dangerous, uncertain, but free. Behind them, Copper Hollow smoldered in silence, unaware that the saloon girl and the outlaw it condemned had just begun the greatest gamble of their lives. The sun rose like a burning coin over the wide horizon, spilling its light across the desert plains. Dust rose behind the mare's hooves as Clara May guided her along the north trail. Jace Redden slumped weakly against her back. His wound had reopened during the night, each jolt of the ride pulling a soft groan from his throat. They had ridden for hours, the world silent except for the whisper of wind through the sagebrush. Behind them, Copper Hollow was a memory of smoke and gunfire, a town that had taken everything from them but left them with each other. Clara slowed the horse near a shallow creek, sliding down carefully. She eased Jace to the ground and fetched water in her hands. He was pale, the blood seeping through his shirt again. Drink, she whispered, holding the cool water to his lips. He obeyed, though his eyes fluttered shut afterward. You should have left me, Clara, he rasped. You could have gone east, started over. She pressed her palm to his cheek. And what would I start over as? A saloon girl with blood on her hands and no name to call her own? He tried to smile, but it faltered. You're better than that life. So are you, she said softly. The words seemed to reach him. He looked away, as though afraid to believe them. I've done things you can't wash off, Clara. Robbed men. Killed more than I can count. The kind of man I am. Don't get happy endings. She knelt beside him, her eyes fierce despite the tears threatening to fall. Maybe not happy, but maybe a chance to be more than what they made you. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the creek's quiet murmur. At last, Jace spoke again. There's a cabin up near Red Mesa, old hideout from my gang days. If I can make it that far, I can rest. After that? He didn't finish. Clara swallowed hard. Then that's where we'll go. They rode through the day, stopping only to rest the horse. The desert grew harsher, sun beating down like punishment. By late afternoon, storm clouds gathered over the horizon, thunder rolling low and heavy. When the first drops fell, Clara spotted it, a crooked cabin tucked against the red cliffs, half swallowed by dust and vines. They reached it just as rain began to pour. Inside, the air smelled of earth and time. She laid Jace on the narrow cot, lighting a lantern that cast a soft golden glow over his face. He looked peaceful for once, like the battle had finally eased its hold on him. As she changed his bandages, his hand brushed hers. You saved me more times than I deserve, he whispered. She smiled faintly. Guess I'm stubborn that way. You could still go, he murmured. Ride out at dawn. The law won't stop hunting me, Clara. They'll hang anyone who stands in my shadow. She shook her head. Then they'll have to hang two shadows. His eyes softened, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside built to a roar, wind battering the shutters, lightning splitting the sky. Clara leaned closer, her voice low. Maybe we both done things we can't take back. But if there's one thing worth keeping, it's this, the choice to start again. He reached up, fingers brushing her cheek. You make a man believe things he forgot he could. Good, she whispered. Then believe in tomorrow. As the thunder rolled and rain drummed against the roof, Jace finally drifted into sleep, his breathing steady. Clara sat beside him through the night, the lantern flickering low. When dawn came, she stepped outside. The air was clean, the storm washed away the dust. The desert stretched endless, quiet, alive. She turned back toward the cabin, toward the man who had once been an outlaw and now was simply a man trying to live. A new day had come, for both of them, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. They had already outrun the past.